Mackenzie Johnston with Tri-State Livestock News, bringing you discussions concerning fair cattle markets. Today we have the opportunity to chat with Austin Snedden. He is a cattle rancher located in Central California. To start off with, can you tell me a little bit about your background and your involvement within the cattle industry?
Yeah. So my family has been raising cattle in Kern County here in Central California since 1868, and my parents and myself, we make 100% of our living off of cattle. You try to keep abreast of the issues that are critical to our industry, and we've been involved locally in the County Cattlemen's Association. We used to be involved with the state association until they kind of chose to take a different route. But yeah, we're involved locally. I was the president of the Kern County Cattlemen's Association about 4 years ago.
So what do you think are the biggest issues standing in the way of fair cattle markets today?
Well, I think that it's a multi-pronged issue that's kind of standing in our way, and it all comes down to packer consolidation, in my opinion, because there's not enough competition out there when you've got these big four packers that are doing 80% of the fat cattle kill. It makes it so that the competition isn't as vibrant as it should be. And I think several of the things that help prop that situation up are the USDA is, in my opinion, kind of helps preserve this consolidated issue that we're seeing because of regulations that affect startup packers from getting in and competing. And I think that, we're to a position where the packers have done such a good job of getting folks either in the USDA or speaking supposedly on behalf of cattlemen that the USDA really helps protect that power that they have. And so, you see it with like the Food Safety Inspection Service rules that allow imported beef to be rewrapped and labeled product of the USA, and imported cattle that are slaughtered here to be labeled product of the USA. That's all kind of some USDA things that are helping preserve this market consolidation that we've seen.
What do you feel would be some solutions that could be implemented to solve these issues?
Well, I think right off the bat, and this is just an honesty issue that USDA needs to address, is that inaccurate labeling. I mean, product of USA should be a born, raised, and slaughtered in the USA label. And I think that country of origin labeling needs to be mandatory, not only for a safety issue in terms of U.S. cattlemen raise the best product, safest product in the world. We need it for that, and we also need it for marketing so that these foreign players are not unloading tons of product on us and using our brand and affecting our market.
There's been a lot of talk about creating more competition within our cattle markets. How do you think we create that competition? And on top of that, what are your thoughts on Senator Grassley's 5014 legislation?
To increase competition, it starts with more people being able to enter that packing market. Because when we've seen the margins like we've seen, especially earlier this year when they were getting up to $400 a head margins, in a free open market, people see those margins and are ready to jump in. And we did see some of that where people were opening small packing plants. But I think we're going to have to address the specific USDA regulations that are preventing some of these investors or cattle people from building these packing plants, whether it's environmental or other regulatory deal, because I think that's going to be the critical issue is people jumping in and getting in on some of that margin and creating more competition. In terms of the 5014, I've tried to educate myself as best I can about that, and I'm not sure if we end up with any more competition. We're still going to be, whether it's 50% negotiated trade or 80% negotiated trade, we still have the primary four players that are making the bids on that deal. And so I think that they are going to be able to find workarounds, regardless of the percentage, to be able to manipulate what they're paying. So I'm not sure if it's a solution. And my other concern about 5014 is that this regulation will be on domestic fat cattle. So any imported boxed beef is not going to be subject to this. So in my estimation, this is creating additional regulation on domestic fat cattle. And so imported boxed beef is going to have one less regulation than we already have. And so it's going to further incentivize maybe imported boxed beef.
You touched on the USDA not exactly helping the cattle producer, helping the consolidation of the packer. We are expecting President-elect Joe Biden to take office come January. Do you think there will be some changes within USDA that would benefit the American cattle producer that will come along with his presidency?
I would assume that it would be kind of a wash, because what we've seen in my lifetime of different administrations is, whether Republican or Democrat, the USDA has done such a job for these packers of keeping them, in my opinion, insulated from policy. So during the Obama administration, when we had COOL, that was kind of a high point for most of us. But, I'm thinking that in terms of the environmental regulations that some of these packing plants have to go through, and environmental reviews that cost $500,000, that's likely to get worse under a Democrat administration.
What other changes do you foresee with this Democratic administration coming on? Do you have any input on that coming down the pipe?
Well, in terms of cattle markets, I really don't know, because the big meat packer donors have donated so bipartisan that they generally get the policy they want regardless of the administration. But in terms of like land policy, we definitely know that things are going to be worse for public lands, grazers, and everything else under a Democrat administration than they would be under the Trump administration.
The USDA has proposed implementing RFID tags for traceability across the industry by 2023. What are your thoughts on this?
Besides wanting to laugh outright at the idea that the USDA, who is okay bringing in chilled beef from Brazil that has FMD and not wanting country of origin labeling, and yet they want individual ID on every animal from every premise in the U.S., besides the irony of that making you want to laugh, that they don't care what country it comes from, but they care what ranch within the U.S. it comes from, is kind of ironic. So the motives behind it, they say it's for traceability, but I'm not buying it, because they're not interested in country of origin labeling. So if you really want traceability, first off, you stop imports from Brazil, who have, of their 26 counties, only one is foot and mouth free. So if you are honest about it being an animal health traceability issue, you don't pursue those routes.
What are your thoughts on the DOJ's investigation into our Big Four beef packers?
I'm hopeful. I think it's better than what we've seen in the past with the USDA investigation. But, they can do a lot of legal things and still be, putting the thumb on our market. So I think that the route that we're going to have to go is probably pursuing antitrust policy that's already on the books, that I think that these Big Four packers are flirting with currently.
What are your thoughts concerning the beef checkoff referendum petition that is currently circulating?
I really like the idea of the referendum and the opportunity for those of us that are paying out a good chunk every year to have a vote on it. I'm not sure we're going to have to do a lot of legwork to get it done, and then still it's going to be up to a vote that we're hoping is conducted in an honest way. I think the biggest thing with the checkoff for me is when you have the NCBA that is the largest contractor of the checkoff, and less than 4% of cattle producers are members of it, I really see the checkoff as mandatory union dues. And so I think that there might be a route to address the checkoff from a mandatory union dues, because, it essentially is mandatory union dues when I choose not to be a member of the NCBA, but yet my checkoff dollars go to fund them. I'm essentially paying mandatory union dues.
Do you think the cattle industry is in danger of becoming vertically integrated?
Absolutely. And we have no excuse to be naive about this, because we can look at the chicken and pork farmers and we can see the road they've gone down. And you can look back 15 years and see that we're right where they were. Mm-hmm. And, you're going to end up with some big guys that produce cattle that still make a lot of money, but the number of cattle producers will just absolutely diminish, just like you'll see with the chicken and pig farmers. There's less of them, and so there's just a few huge ones and not many of them.
Do you have any closing statements you'd like to make regarding our cattle industry and our cattle markets?
Well, I just think it's going to be really important for all of us to make it clear to any of our elected officials at whatever level you can tell them, whether it's your congressman, your senator, whatever, that the NCBA is in their ear. They have created a well-insulated deal. They've done their work in Washington. And so a lot of these folks don't know that NCBA represents less than 4% of cattle producers. And so they really need to know that there's a lot of us independent folks out there that are America first. We want the beef labeled so that consumers can choose to support the ranchers that do it in the best way possible, raising the safest and best product out there. And so I just think it's important for folks to get in the ear of any of their elected representatives and remind them that we have a voice and it's not necessarily the NCBA.